Welcome back, Cal listeners. This is Methodical Millions, where you can better your future and better yourself. Cal, we've got another awesome guest with us today. So everyone listening, please welcome Yaro. Yaro, how are you today?
Hey guys, how are you? I'm doing well.
Good. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
So Yaro, we found you on Twitter. I thought you had a cool profile, building a digital product portfolio at Evercode Labs and Playgroup HQ. So, we'll get into that. I almost always find guests from Twitter. I think it's a great place to find people who kind of, document their life and trying to help the world. So it looks like you're, one of those people. So, Yaro, why don't we just get right into it? What gets you excited about life?
Yeah, man, that's a really that's a really good question. It's something I've been, I'm probably constantly thinking about, if that makes sense. Like what actually makes me happy. Man, and I when I was younger, I think partying and with girls and all that stuff, I think that made me happy. And as now that I have a family and I'm getting older, I really think it's it's more just peace of mind. And being safe and being able to provide for myself and for my family, um, and knowing that I can do so without having anyone take it away from me. I think that makes me happy. If that makes sense. Like just owning my time is probably like the number one thing that makes me happy, because then I can just do whatever I want and I'm not beholden or tied to any one specific person, company, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that's pretty much, I'd probably say, what makes me happy. It doesn't take a lot to make me happy. Peace of mind, it's number one thing.
Yeah, right on. Are you big into like meditating, or do you have like this, have you had this epiphany where you know how to get to your peace of mind state? What is it that you do? What do you look for?
Yeah, I mean, I used to be into meditating a lot when I was younger. And now it's I just like maybe I don't have too much time for it at this moment in time, and that's probably an indication that I should meditate more. I think there's like that one saying where it's like, if you can't find 20 minutes to meditate daily, you should probably clear out your calendar to do an hour. Just because you probably have just too much stuff to do. But in terms of like in peace, by peace of mind, I just mean like not needing to worry about where that next paycheck comes from, not needing to worry about where money's coming from, not needing to worry about, just all the basic necessities of life, if that makes sense. Once you have all that covered, I think, by peace of mind, that's kind of what I mean is I'm not worried. I'm not, waking up every day thinking, okay, well, and I have to go to my job because I have to pay for my rent and I have to pay for my family and et cetera, et cetera. And what if my job, decides to cut me, et cetera. That kind of peace of mind, if that makes sense.
It totally does. So, when I was leaving university, I had a valet job driving, let's say 40 minutes to go to work. It was like a couple nights a week. And, I had applied to a car dealership. So I was working two jobs for quite a while and then, switched to sales. And it was always a grind, early 20s, to be like, well, what's my identity? What's going to make me money? And you mentioned the happy thing, because I know I wasn't happy. I kept pushing for like, I'm always on someone's schedule. Like it was a big identity shock in terms of, like when you're younger, it's just you're with your friends, you are who you are. And then you have to transition to adulthood where it's just like, okay, well, when I was growing up, like parents or teachers' advice, this is how we did things. And I think the world changes so fast. People talk about affordability of housing, food, cost of education, value of education, all these things. And you kind of get mashed together in this ever changing world. And then, I think like that's why I like asking, because it's a journey for a lot of people. And I think those of us lucky enough to get to, a decent income, and like that's why it's so important. I think people call it like, I always say like a turtle going to the sea. Like it's not guaranteed that you're going to make it, but the more you push, your odds are better. And I think if you have this mentality of I'm going to do it, or I'm going to do good things, or kind of control your life, you kind of steer the direction. I think you end up slowly unlocking those secrets. And what was your journey like? How did you end up to this state where you said, I can't afford my life, I can do things I want to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, it kind of mostly, I don't even know where it started really. I think it's probably like after I got my first job or something. So I went to school, and I got a degree in electrical engineering. And then like I got my first job, right? It was an internship at at a company, well, whatever it did, the logistics don't matter, but like I get to my internship the first day, and it's fun, you're excited to be there. You're like, yeah, man, I'm gonna, I'm spending, years learning, this skill, designing, etc. You go to your first job, you sit down, everything, it's exciting for the first, 1 week, 2 weeks. You're learning new things, you're learning the company culture, the politics, etc. And then, as time progresses on, after months, um, after, well, for me, it was like after a few months, I just started realizing that it's just kind of the same grind every day, if that makes sense. The same types of projects, the same types of, you're working with the same types of people. It's kind of a monotone setting. You're kind of peg holed in as like a cogwheel, that kind of makes this whole machine run. And I just kind of, started realizing that maybe I don't want to do this, if that makes sense. Like, I don't want to actually work for 40 years of my life, doing the same thing just so I can get a paycheck, so I can, support, my lifestyle as well as, upkeep my family. So that kind of got me started into my journey. And then from there, um, what I really started getting into is like the whole startup scene. So I started reading stories, and this was like probably 10 years ago. I think I was like 20 then. Started reading stories about, um, all these startups, raising capital, building these multi-million-dollar startups, and then they exit, and then they make millions, and then they live their nice life on a beach. And I was like, yeah, that definitely seems like what I want. So I started doing that. And it means some of my friends started some really kind of stupid ideas, but we built them, we launched them. They didn't really work. And then I just realized that I don't really want to do that whole startup path, that venture path, if you will. What I want to do is just kind of build just a few products myself, that I support. Being an indie hacker, quote unquote, is kind of what that means. And so that's kind of what got me started on that journey. And then that led me into starting Evercode Labs, which is kind of like a digital product portfolio. And then, kind of moving into a bunch of other, smaller digital products, which I hope in a few years will make me enough income where I can just live off that and support those products, as opposed to working for, like a bigger company.
That's amazing. I love the awakening moment. And, I had a similar approach where I would follow. I was a big fan of actually, the beginning was probably Shark Tank, because you'd see, celebrities bidding on businesses, you see entrepreneurs, and it was exciting. You'd learn about, valuations. And then, I'd seen there was a guest shark called Chris Sacca, who was a cool guy because he's like, I invested in Uber. And that was like a really cool company at the time. And then I remember YouTubing his videos. It was, I landed on a podcast called This Week in Startups. It was a really cool show. Shout out to Jason
Yeah,
Calacanis. So
Jason Calacanis. Yeah,
yeah, he's a
I
cool
listened to
dude.
that too. It's good.
Yeah, he's awesome. And I called in once, so that was like my foray into podcasting. I was like, hey, I'm gonna call in and ask a question. So yeah, he's a cool dude. He's a really proper grinder. He's got a lot of good personalities on there. Anything from investing to entrepreneurs. And so I was enamored with that space, and just the idea that you could do something different. And then I love tech, because, or startups specifically, because it's merit based, right? It's like, what's the end product, and what's the building process like? No one cares about like where you're from or where you went to school. So these were like the key things that I found. And of course, the fact that the upside just so huge, right? These people actually did end up controlling their own direction and making money. So I totally agree with that. I'm very curious about what those startup ideas were. Can you tell us very briefly what you started with your friends?
Yeah, so I think the first idea was, so it's called Scout Out. I think you can still find a landing page on scoutoutapp.com. The actual app itself isn't isn't on the App Store anymore, but like the landing page is there, so you can, you kind of look at the idea. But I mean, essentially, the idea was, so we got this idea from Yik Yak. I don't know if you guys remember Yik Yak. It was like a this kind of stupid app. Like I don't even know if it's still around anymore. But 10 years ago, I was like, I think I downloaded it on the internet, just on the App Store. I was browsing it. I think it was like one of the featured apps. So I downloaded it just to check it out. And it's this like anonymous messaging app where you can post, but there's it's anonymous, and it's location based, so you can't see comments and you can't see like messages to the community unless you're actually within like a mile vicinity of wherever that message was posted, or something like that. It was really dumb, but then there's so me and my friends were thinking like, dude, this is just the stupidest app in the world, and it's raised millions of dollars and it's growing like crazy. So let's do something like that, just some stupid idea. So then I just came up with this idea, where you so you have a list of, well, it's an app, and then basically there's a set of filters, and you choose, price, you choose how far you want to walk, you choose the type of club or bar that you want to go to, and then we give you an arrow, or an actual like direction, turn by turn direction, to that bar or club. But the catch is you don't know what the name of the bar is until you actually get there. So it's like a mystery bar finder app. And yeah, so it's a mobile app. We built it, we launched it, we were marketing it as like a travel friendly app. So say you go to Las Vegas, you're like, okay, let's just hit up some random bar. You're drunk, whatever. Just try to find any bar that's, say like a gay bar or whatever, like a strip bar. And then it just takes you there, and you don't even know where you're going until you find it. So it's kind of like an adventure, but also gets you to a destination. In the end, we launched and we had like maybe, I don't know, 5 downloads or something like that. So maybe our marketing plan wasn't the best, but it was a pretty cool product, and I learned a ton from it. Like, we spent 6 months on it, and I was, I'm working full time, right? And then I spend, and this before I had like, I was single and I had tons of time, so I was spending another 25 hours to 30 hours per week after my full time job. It's about 70 hours total in terms of work, building this. And so yeah, I learned so much, and I loved it, but ended up failing. So yeah.
That's a beautiful story. I think, just the fact of trying something and, having the humility to go through it. And, I think I always tell people that, even if no one downloads it, no one's going to take that experience from you, that you built the app, that you launched it, that you even got, one download. Because I think like the first 5, 10 customers is super important for any business, because every business has to get 5, 10 customers. They don't just start with, millions, unless it's some crazy, VC backed. I think Clubhouse was like, just seems out of the gate, like backed by VCs. And, you plug in a celebrity. And I remember hearing that I think Instagram was similar, where it was like plugged on Twitter and they had like 25,000 downloads the first day or something. So maybe there's some secret sauce. I'm not quite sure, but no, that's really, really cool. And so was it from there to Evercode, or did you have anything in between? What was that process like?
So I'm from Minneapolis, and I guess Minneapolis is like the home. It's like the Silicon Valley of healthcare and medical startups as well. So that's kind of like the thing that it's known for. You got Medtronic was started here. I think Boston Scientific headquarters is here, and you got a bunch of other like really big name and startup like healthcare and medical device, or just like medical grade type of apps and devices, and just healthcare. Like United Healthcare is based here. So you got, this is like the core of all healthcare related items. And so I used to work for kind of a healthcare company doing iOS development, because after I did that app, I actually had enough experience to then actually get an entry level position at at a medical device company doing app development for them. So that was a plus there. But I started getting to like the whole medical space, because it seems like a pretty core place, and there seems like there's not a lot, like too much innovation there as well. So I was thinking of a bunch of different ideas in that space. I'm always just thinking of things. I just can't stop the brain from thinking of ideas. So I came up with one idea. It was actually one of my friends who came up with it, and we ended up signing up for this thing called, I think it's called Google Startups or something like that. It's like a hackathon. It's like a 3-day a weekend hackathon where you come up with an idea, you gather a team, you build like an MVP product, and then I mean, it's just for fun. I mean, you win, either you win or you don't win, but the whole core is just to get something out there. Just come with an idea to build it as quickly as possible, just to have something where it's somewhere to start with. But we came with this idea where there's a ton of people with like COPD, with asthma, and a bunch of breathing related issues. So we were thinking, okay, so what can we do here? And my friend he knew about this data set, basically this what was it called? It's like a pollution data set, so you can kind of see like the air qualities mapped across all of the United States. I mean, I think it's provided by the government actually, but what we did is, the idea was to take that map and then basically overlay that with maybe like where you're traveling, or where you're going to be, or how the air quality is outside of where you live, or where you're going to be traveling to. Say, using the same Las Vegas example, say you're traveling to Las Vegas and you have asthma, and you know that this week is going to be a very bad week for pollution and air quality. So you kind of can be prepared for that if you're someone with COPD or asthma, where it's going to be maybe a little bit too difficult to breathe. So stuff like that. That's kind of the core of the idea. So we built this really quick MVP. It had a really kind of like simple data set, just because we had to build this thing as quickly as possible. Had a really nice UI that was also pretty simple, but it kind of got the point across. We ended up getting third place on that. Which is pretty cool. And then we built, we started building that for the next, maybe like 3 or 4 months. So we had me, my friend, and a few other of the team members that we had gathered in that hackathon. And then, a couple of them were students, a couple of them were parents. And then, people just started slowly like kind of dropping off, school started back up. So it's like, okay, Jake can't, can't commit now because, he has, schoolwork. Jill can't do that because she has a family, and so it starts like kind of crumbling down, and then we started losing people by people. And then eventually there's just me, and I was like, well, fuck it, like it's just not gonna I'm just like, it's gonna be too hard to do this by myself, and I should probably, but like it's also hard to find people, and so I just ended up shutting that down too. But that was like another idea that I had that yeah.
Yeah, honestly, that would have been a great app for Bahrain, because I know generally the air quality is pretty poor in some regions here. So, it doesn't mean it's not a good idea. It's just you have the commitment thing, and it's not really anyone's fault when sometimes their life just overtakes. They have to have set priorities, and even though this could have been something very, very big, it's just because everyone has their own life. And I absolutely I love that idea. Honestly, as you were explaining it, I was like, this is really cool, because obviously now, even with Google, you get some sort of update of regarding the air quality in your region, like you mentioned, and it's the same idea or a similar idea to what you had. And so, what was next after that? Did that take you to the digital portfolio? And do you mind explaining a bit more to our listeners what that entails?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, after that, I kind of took a break for a while, and I just kind of focused on myself and didn't really do anything. Then I got a girlfriend, which is now my wife. So I had took a few years sabbatical where I was just focusing on myself and building a family. And then just recently, maybe I'll probably say about a year and a half ago, I started back into kind of doing digital products. But at this point, I was like, you know what, I don't want a team. I just want to do things by myself on my own time. I don't have to rely on anyone. And then I stumbled upon this site called Indie Hackers. So shout out to Cortland Allen. I was on his podcast, I think like a few months ago. So really huge podcast. I love it. Great guy. So he created this awesome community called Indie Hackers, which is, it's a community of people who are building products, mostly digital products, kind of by themselves, and earning a livable income by themselves. So people are making between, let's say $2,000 a month to, there's people out there that are making like $50,000 a month by themselves building their own products. So, but there's a lot of people that also make zero, so it's a wide range, but it's for people that are, doing things solo. So I stumbled upon this community. I don't even know how, maybe on Reddit or something. So I ended up really getting into that. And then I just started like scrolling, reading. I was hooked now. I was like, dude, people are actually making money by themselves. Like I thought you had to have like millions of dollars of funding. I thought you had to have a huge team. I thought you had to scale this thing. to venture, like millions of dollars to be successful in the startup space. And I was like, no, you don't. You actually, you can actually build things yourself. And I was like, dude, this is what I want to do. And then I ended up starting, a few smaller communities and a few podcasts, which then I actually were acquired last year. And then I took that funding that I had basically from those sales to start building this digital product portfolio that I'm currently building now.
That's amazing. I love the enthusiasm and the always stepping up to bat. That's really, really cool. So where did you sell these businesses? I'm curious how you came to, the valuations, and how do you even sell a podcast? Because if you're like the host or the personality, I guess you sell the viewership and then there's a new host. What was that transition like for the person who bought it? Did they keep growing it?
Yeah, so that's definitely a good question. So I used to run I guess, well, it started as a podcast. It's called Newsletter Crew, so you can go to newslettercrew.com. Check that out. It's a really awesome site. They've the new owners have taken it like 10x what I could have taken it. So I'm really excited. I'm really glad I had the opportunity to exit out of that and then just see it grow into something that's even better. But it started as a podcast as myself. And you're right, there's that personality issue there. And I did, as I was doing, as I was building this podcast, I did realize that, and I started to kind of step away more from myself. I try to be less as the front person and more of just the background kind of person, and then have the guests be the celebrity or the person that is the core of things. But it was, so I guess it was a podcast first, and then as I slowly started building it up, I um you know created a community around it. I created a newsletter around it. I created a website with like a blog and a content related focus on it. So it turned more from a podcast into a kind of like a membership site. So membership was kind of the core way that I made money off of it. And then I also did ads. So I sold sponsorships on the podcast, on the newsletter, on the website, and stuff like that. So it was about half memberships and half yeah, about half the revenue was memberships, half the revenue was sponsorships. And then I got that up to, I don't think I can say exactly the number I was making, but I ended up selling that for a six-figure exit. So it wasn't like crazy high, but it was like enough to get me enough, I guess momentum or capital to maybe start a few other things that then I can grow further. So um I don't know if that answers your question. I kind of started rambling on, so apologies about that.
Not at all. That's perfect. And it just shows you've created something, you built something, and really made it to something else, or passed it on to someone who can take it further while you can concentrate on, you know, like you mentioned, the other things in life. Where, to be honest, I was once upon a time I would have loved to have many properties and cars, and I think all of us may like a bit of that. But now, just like you, I'm not about the material stuff. It's about to having that life that you just don't have to worry about anything. And that to me is what I want. I don't even care about the material stuff as much as I do anymore, almost to no point. I just want to make sure that if there's something in life I want to do, I can do it. And this seems to me that once you sold the podcast, you got a nice enough figure that gives you the independence for you to focus on what really matters. It's another boost. That's what our listeners want, and that's what we preach here in our podcast ourselves. So when it comes to the digital portfolio, talk us more about that if you don't mind.
Yeah, so the digital portfolio is like, I think I can kind of like spin it in a way where it's like it's a portfolio of very either smaller or medium sized digital products, like SaaS businesses, maybe some membership sites, maybe community, um, that will make up like a portion of my income, right? So I mean, I'm slowly building this up. So the first one I'm doing is it's called Playgroup. It's a community based platform. So kind of like Circle or Discourse or Discord. Discord is more of like a chat based community, but this is more like a kind of like a forum. It's kind of like blended with forums and chat at the same time. So it has best kind of best of the both worlds. So that's the first thing I'm building. It's been pretty difficult to build, but my goal is to get that to like maybe $5,000 per month, which then I can then roll into like maybe a new product, maybe another membership site, maybe another community, potentially another SaaS business, like a micro SaaS. So it's like a, it's a set of smaller digital products that will earn you enough income, to be self-sustaining essentially. So that's kind of the whole idea of this digital product portfolio that I'm building.
That's amazing. I love it. And yeah, I find that, as I said earlier, your knowledge will compound, and your what you learn and what you take away. And I think it's a really big boosting factor for growing. And I think the underlying theme here is that if you don't try, you're not going to get anywhere. And can you imagine if you were still at your original job and never tried those, that startup with your friend, or never tried coding, and you could see I always say, like, drawing a line in the sky between stars. Like, you can see your points. They're not going to be a straight line, but they all connect with each other. So really, really kudos to you. I love that. Um,
Yeah,
so
thanks.
yeah, I know it's really, I really admire that. That's awesome. And so what is it that makes, like, can you teach this? Like with indie hackers, do you think anyone can kind of follow this route and grow? Is there a particular set of skills? If someone wants to try and kind of get into this space, what does it take to build, a digital persona, a digital product? So for people listening, do they just read on indie hackers? And can you explain a bit about that?
Yeah, so it's like, I think the biggest piece of advice is, one, you will fail. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, as you've seen, I've had many failures throughout my career, as being an entrepreneur. Starting, since I was 22, with my first, startup, et cetera, failed. Had another idea that failed. Then, and it does take you down, but as long as you have that perseverance, you will succeed at some point. As long as you just keep trying, keep doing new ideas. But like, I think the biggest thing is also understanding when you should shut it down as well. Like, knowing that, okay, this isn't actually working out, shut it down, move on to the next idea, and kind of iterate quickly. But I think for anyone that's starting out, I wouldn't say, like, don't try to start like a SaaS business, like a software as a service business. Don't try to start something that's, with the goal or the intention of making $1 million or $2 million a year or a month or whatever. There's this awesome kind of philosophy. It's called the stair step approach. So there's a guy named Rob Walling who's really smart and runs a startup or another podcast called Startups for the Rest of Us. So I listen to that pretty religiously. I really love it, and it's also the same type of like podcast where it's like people solo founders or solo indie hackers that are trying to build a portfolio of digital products. And his whole thing is the stair step approach, where you want to start with maybe the smallest product that you could get out as quickly as possible. It could be like an ebook, it could be like some sort of digital download. Like, so I don't know if you guys know what Gumroad is, but like tons of people are selling like their courses or like an ebook online, or like how to build, start, whatever your domain of knowledge is. You can bundle that up and maybe create some sort of course on Udemy, some sort of ebook on Gumroad, or whatever you want. So you build that, and then you market it, and then you sell it, and maybe that's that'll make you $10 to $20 to $30,000 or whatever. And then you go to, like, you take that money, then you kind of reinvest it into maybe something that's a little bit more next level. So like maybe a podcast, perhaps, like a community, like a private community where you have, people paying you membership fees, and then they are part of your community, and you teach them about XYZ. And then once that is making, $1,000 or $2,000 a month, maybe at that point it's enough to actually quit your job and then focus full time on that community or another product. So then you can start building that SaaS business or that next level type of business. So it's, it's this kind of stair step approach where you take baby steps, and then as each step you learn a bunch of things. Like when you create your course or when you create your ebook, at the very first step, you learn how to do marketing. Maybe you'll create your Twitter, build your Twitter up, do a podcast store, be on many people's podcasts, do some guest blog posting, understand SEO, digital marketing, and then so you can market your ebook. You take all those skills, and then you bring that up to the next level where it's a higher business. And now that you've had some confidence and some momentum, it's going to be a lot easier to start that harder business, if that makes sense. So that, I think that's probably the best approach. That's probably the easiest approach. That's kind of how I started as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. The Ed Lattimore approach. We had him on the show, and he's a huge Gumroad guy. So yeah, I like following him along too, and seeing this whole. I've heard people talk about it before. You go from the Industrial Revolution to like the internet has spawned this. Um, you know, like I feel like startups are like a cohesive emulation of big companies where it's like, hey, we can do that too if we just raise some money. And then now the new derivative or the evolution is really just, do it on your own and build your own brand, build your own personality. And I think, you hit the nail on the head, which is just do it, just work, just build, and just post content. And I think, people crave authenticity. They crave, unique connections with enlightenment and people who they can, learn from. And, I always believe in like good mentorship. Life's too short to just follow someone else's path. So it's kind of like this. I think Twitter specifically has opened up this whole place for, sharing ideas. It's less formal and more accessible, right?
Yeah, man, Twitter has been like, I would say an enormous benefit to my life. I mean, it's amazing. Like I think everything I've built on has like pretty much sprung through Twitter. Like, I mean, not everything, but like it definitely is that Kickstarter. So I mean, if someone's looking to build this type of like digital product portfolio, 100% I would get a Twitter and start posting things. There's this movement called like Build in Public where there's people out there, and I do this as well. So you can follow me on Twitter, and I'm kind of building in public, my digital product portfolio. So I basically just give updates on exactly how I'm building, what I'm building, what am I doing, give updates on, any new customers, new trials, maybe the, statistics or analytics of the website, what I'm working on next, what I did this week. So people understand that step-by-step basis. And I think that helps as well. And a ton of people can learn from that kind of stuff as well. So yeah, Twitter, 100%. I don't know if you don't have a Twitter, I always tell this to my friends who ask me like, how do I do this? I'm like, you got to start a Twitter, then just be on there and start absorbing as much knowledge as you can.
100%. I know it's been instrumental for us. Like when we started this, it was basically in pandemic, and Cal and I used to talk a lot about, ideas of how to live a better life and all this stuff. And then, we moved it to the spoken form, but Twitter was huge at just starting to post content, and then like episodes. And, I think the biggest thing is you get into this, there's different spheres of Twitter. So like real estate, crypto, and all these like SaaS or startup areas. But I'm just like really waking up to the amount of amazing people like yourself who are doing things. And, if we couple accessibility with, people coming on, and you appreciate this from a podcast perspective, you owe us nothing. I'm always very impressed by people who donate their time and have an amazing conversation like this. And I love it. I love the whole process. I love, the value add to people listening, to ourselves. And it's just so amazing that, I really, really thank you for coming on. And yeah, I wish you all the best of success. You have to keep in touch. We'll be following along as you, build all your projects. I did hit sign up for your newsletter. So for asset builders. So we'd love to see it as that evolves.
Awesome. Well, thank you, John and Cal, for having me on. And yeah, I really appreciate it. And you guys are doing an amazing job with this podcast. So I'm excited to listen to this and some of the other episodes you've come up with. What do you recommend as like the number one episode to listen to? I'm just curious.
All of them. You have to. Yeah. You know what?
Right answer.
Maybe. Yeah. Maybe. You know what? A lot of the guest ones are good. I find that, maybe you can give us some feedback as well. But I was talking to Cal, like as we grow the collection, we do have a similar website and we're dabbling in, some written stuff. But you almost need like, the internet came out with like, I remember years ago, like those like keyword tags you can search by like, a word, and then it'll aggregate, all the content related to that. I forget what the word is, but like you can click and I think we need some kind of organizational tool that way that, people can organize a playlist of just SaaS videos or just, crypto and like things like that. So, as the collection builds, I think we'll have to explore something like that. But yeah, I mean, and as you said, like maybe, I don't know, have you found, on your end that descriptions in the episodes or things like that make it easier for people to find or maybe explain? Like, I know some people like to timestamp the whole thing. We're not really doing that right now.
Yeah, timestamping, like it takes a long time unless there's some services that can do it for you like quicker. But yeah, I mean, I don't actually know too much about podcast SEO. I don't know, when I was starting the podcast, it was just like I just wanted to get things out there. So I don't know. I don't know how people found it, or I mean, if you did search like newsletter or something, I think you could I think it was like number one, but that's because there's like not too many. I think I was the first newsletter based podcast on I guess on the App Store or on the podcast playlist. But anyways, I'm not too sure about podcast SEO, so I'm probably not the best person to talk about that. And like and the podcast was just part of that business. Like it started scaling up as I started building things out. Like Methodical Millions, this is something that you could, it starts as a podcast, could potentially move into, you start a community. And then you maybe have like a membership around that where you have some sort of private based, like a private community where you pay, and then all your listeners can go on and actually discuss things on the podcast, etc. I don't know. I mean, there's just so much you can do. But yeah, it's pretty crazy. So I'm not too sure. I don't know if that answered the question or not, but
Yeah, no, it did. And like we've played with, I did, I've kind of dropped off a bit, but I did do some, I call it methodical minute. So I do postings on like cool stuff like Jeff Bezos is retiring or people go to space, Twitter announcing Twitter Blue, little like digestible things. We did kind of roll out a Discord. So I talked about community building there because like Discords have exploded. So you can build, my actually idea, which, we'll bring it to light here, was how do you incentivize someone to come on the show? You can build in like in-house guest Discord. So, kind of like Indie Hacker, but people who have been on the show can kind of interact and collaborate and then, share ideas, almost like a little bit of a safe space for, maybe like not quite build in public, but build together. So, yeah, I think it's ever evolving. And, you talked earlier about momentum. Cal, isn't this right? Like when we started, I think we were like 20 or 30 episodes in and we had a goal of like get a guest on the show. Right. And I think it was, the first year in, I guess we got bored of talking to ourselves. I found a guest on Twitter and, then like a month later was another guest and now it's 100% guests. So like that momentum factor is super important as you kind of build, learn, grow, and try things. You kind of unlock what works and you unlock the recipe and the thing that clicks. And then I think, just to summarize, everything you're doing is awesome, which is like, you're trying different things, you're playing around and you're seeing what works and then you're leaning into that. Right. So I love how that process works. I think it's super useful and I'm a huge fan of it.
Thanks, man. Thanks. I'd love to join the Discord too. But actually, on my Discord, since I'm into NFTs and stuff like that, my whole Discord profile doesn't even match like my Web 2 persona isn't even my Web 3 persona. So it's like
all I text Cal about is NFTs. I mean, we'll do that off air as well. So yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack there. So on our Methodical Millions website, I have listen, read, learn, and there's an NFT section. So I minted a couple like blurred faces of ourselves. And my idea was to mint episodes and eventually mint, like when we go to YouTube, I was going to mint like a slide and like, we're thinking of like, gifting it to the person on the show. So the guests get like a value add or something. And then, is it worth anything? Probably not, but it's just an interesting process. And I've really, followed along and yeah, we'll continue that chat offline for sure.
Nice, man. Yeah, that's a really cool idea. But yeah, I'll definitely catch on in the Discord too. That sounds like a pretty awesome idea. I could definitely riff on that for a bit.
Yeah.
But I got to get going because I got a few other commitments I got to make. But yeah, thank you guys so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. Hopefully I can come back on in, in a month or 2 or 3 or however, or whenever you guys want me back on. I'd love to talk more about, seems like there's a bunch of, a bunch of things we can talk about, like with NFTs and crypto, et cetera. But yeah, thank you guys so much.
You're the
Absolutely.
man.
Anytime, man. Yeah, I would love to have you back anytime. You're welcome. And we'll stay in touch.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Yaro. Cheers.
Cheers.
So with that said, let's wrap up today's episode. Thank you for listening to another episode of Methodical Millions, where you can better your future and better yourself.
Thanks, everyone.